Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Bit of a sorry tale really for this particular video. I've come back to a place in the New Forest which was by Smugglers Road car park, it's called, and I've been here a couple of times. I was here 3 weeks ago to do a bit of a night shoot. I spotted one of those opportunities in the calendar where in theory there was going to be no moon and the sky was going to be clear. So I did what any aspiring astrophotographer would do, grab my gear and head out for a night's photography. Well, I learnt a few things that night, made a few mistakes, and I'd like to say they were mistakes that I overcame that evening, but in practice it was not the best night's photography, but I did learn a lot from doing it, and I hope that some of the mistakes I made you can learn from too. So let's get into what happened, shall we? So what exactly went wrong then? Well, right from the beginning, I think I was on a bit of a hiding to nothing with this shoot. The first thing I think to say is that although this is a beautiful place, I'd really not done enough advanced planning when it came to composition. So I had been here before, so it's a location that I knew, and I come here actually to shoot Comet Neowise, which would have been in the northern sky pretty much behind me at the moment. And that particular evening, although I didn't really get to photograph the comet because of cloud in the sky, looking the other way across this plain in front of me, some ground fog began to appear, and I got some really beautiful shots of the ground fog. And then as in the early hours, as dawn approached, to my left over here, the moon, a thin crescent moon, was rising with Venus in the sky as well, and so I did actually get some really nice shots that day. So it's been a location that has kind of been kind to me in the past, so I thought I'd come out here again, mainly because I wanted to see whether or not I could achieve something I'd not managed before, which was get a decent dark sky Milky Way shot in the New Forest. So having checked photo pills, I reckoned that the moon was going to set at about 1:45 that night. So I set out here in good time for that. Unfortunately, I got that wrong. The moon set at about 1:45, so somehow or other I was an hour out. I don't know how I managed that. And the other thing that I had really not appreciated soon enough was that there was still quite a lot of, I think, thin high-level cloud on the horizon in the south, and it wasn't really apparent to the naked eye, and I didn't really see it till I started trying to process my pictures, and that was exacerbated really by the situation with the moon. So why was the moon a problem? Well, you really don't want the moon in the sky when you're trying to shoot the Milky Way. We all know that, don't we? Hopefully. And it just washes it out. But I'd kind of hoped against hope that coming here after moonset would mean that the sky would be dark enough And as it happened, that was not the case. So there is this thing called astronomical twilight, for those of you who don't know, and this is the period after sunset during which it's still not really fully dark. And it doesn't really get fully dark until at least this time of year, a couple of hours after sunset. And what I discovered that evening was, I think there is also something of a moonlight astronomical twilight period. So we had something, I think, like about a 60% moon that night. So it was quite bright. And it meant that actually the sky was not fully dark after the moon set. And that was made worse by the fact that there was this thin, high-level, wispy cloud. And also, I think, just some haze, general haze in the air. And so that meant that the night sky was pretty much being washed out far more than I had anticipated. So that was my first main problem that night. And it meant that I was pretty much doomed from the beginning as far as Milky Way photography was concerned. Now, my third issue really relates back to composition, that I was hoping that here I would do a little bit of light painting. And I have put myself up here on the top of this small rise. It's not, I wouldn't really call it a hill as such. We're probably about 10 to 15 meters up here above the surrounding area. And one thing that you'll note, if I just step back a bit and show you exactly where I am, it's pretty featureless. There's really very little here to show. And so there was just not any significant foreground for me to light up. And so that meant that when it came to trying to do a little bit of foreground lighting, particularly on ground that mostly is lower than where I was, and I was trying to photograph the night sky, that was also doomed to pretty much to failure. I did do a little bit of foreground lighting, but it was not in any way dramatic. It was just a bit of practice, really. It just helps me hone some of my skills when it comes to what I'm doing in Photoshop. And finally, the other issue that I had on this particular shoot was a bit of ill discipline, I suppose, when it came to the actual photography itself and putting it into practice. And that was one of focusing. And although I'd gone to a lot of trouble to make sure that I was sharply focused right at the beginning of the shoot, when it came to one of the final parts of the shoot that I was hoping to do, which was a vertical panorama of the Milky Way, which would have been doomed to failure anyway because of the washing out of the sky, but what I didn't realise was that as I was setting up for that and putting my camera on the Allen Wallace Z mount to make the panorama easier to execute, was that I must have knocked the focus ring somewhere during that process. And so suddenly every photograph that I took from that point forward was not sharp, was out of focus and unusable therefore. So yeah, there was a bit of a sorry tale really, but not, I would say, a completely wasted night, because I learned a lot of lessons that night. I learned about the need to make sure that I've really thought through in advance the composition at the location that I'm going to make the most of the opportunities to scout it out during the daytime, so that by the time I get there I know exactly how I'm going to set up and what kind of image it is that I want to take. Learned a lot about making sure that the equipment setup is correct, particularly about things like focus as well. learnt more about the mistakes you can make with regard to timing and the night sky in terms of how easily that can be washed out. Would I do it again? That's a tricky one. Astrophotography in the UK, opportunities to do it are few and far between, and if you just constantly wait for perfect conditions, you're probably going to be disappointed most of the time, and so you've got to just keep at it. You've just got to keep trying. You've got to make sure you've got some kind of gear with you whenever you might potentially have the opportunity. And that was driven home to me the other day when we had a little family visit to the Gower Peninsula in Wales near Swansea. And we were just gathered around a table outside in the late evening, and despite the weather forecast of being mostly cloudy, where we were locally toward the end of that peninsula, the sky cleared, and it meant that suddenly there was an opportunity that I hadn't expected, a couple of hours after sunset with no moon, to photograph the Milky Way. So I popped back into the neighbouring field to this house. It's more of an orchard actually, with the owner's permission, and took some night sky photographs. Just with a very basic setup. I had my tripod, I had my Nikon D750 with a wide angle lens, and that was it. I had none of the other gear with me. So it did mean at least that I could use the basic facilities on the camera with a steady tripod as well to be able to take some photographs when I didn't think I would even have the opportunity. And so it just shows you just need to keep your stuff around and keep it with you and keep trying, and to accept the fact that a lot of the times when you go out and you're trying to do nighttime photography, unfortunately the stars are not going to come out to play, but you stick at it and you make the most of the conditions that you have. So there you go, bit of a mixed bag for this particular shoot. But as I say, learned a lot from it. Anyway, if you've got this far, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. See you soon.